And I'll be sharing my time with the member from Red Deer Lacombe, Madam Speaker. And as the Member of Parliament for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, it's an honour and a privilege to speak to the motion put forth by my Defence Committee Conservative colleague. As a Conservative Defence critic, the Conservative member for the Manitoba riding of Selkirk-Interlake Eastman is doing an outstanding job on behalf of the women and men who currently serve their country as members of the Canadian Armed Forces. It's a pleasure to work with such an informed, hard-working Member of Parliament. The motion calls today on the federal government to show support and appreciation for the brave women and men serving in the Canadian Armed Forces by reversing its decision to take away from the soldiers fighting against ISIS the tax benefit which provides them with $1,500 to $1,800 per month for hardship and risk associated with their deployment, and retroactively provide the payment to members stationed at Camp Arishan whose tax relief was cancelled September 1st, 2016. We support our troops 100%. Canadian soldiers are on the front lines in the Middle East in the international war against terrorism. While I believe our soldiers are the first class, they're getting second-class treatment from a Prime Minister who devalues the dangers they face every day. All other coalition soldiers receive special compensation through reduced taxation on their earnings. Last September, 15 soldiers serving in Kuwait were told they had to pay an additional $1,500 to $1,800 in taxes. The Liberal government had downgraded the risk level they faced, so in effect, the government took away part of their danger pay they earned by increasing taxes. Soldiers thought this was unfair and appealed. Conservatives thought it was unfair too, so when the Liberal Minister of Defence came before our Parliamentary Defence Committee, my colleagues and I had some tough questioning for him. I'm going to now quote the Minister's own words because they're unambiguous, or so Conservatives on the Defence Committee thought when we heard them. The Conservative member for Selkirk-Interlake Eastman. The first question I want to ask relates to Operation Impact. I sent you a letter, Minister, on November 10th about some of our troops that are based in Air Force Task Force in Kuwait. We have 300 plus troops there, and 15 of them are at a U.S. Air Base Camp Arishan. They're not getting the same danger pay or income tax considerations as the rest of our troops in Kuwait. Are you committed to fixing this inequity and making sure they get the same pay and benefits as all our other troops who are in Operation Impact? Liberal Defence Minister. Absolutely. There were even some additional challenges when I first came in and then when I first arrived. We were able to address some of the direct things that were under my authority and also getting with the support from the Minister of Finance. For the specific ones that you're talking about, there is some work that the military has to do with the Treasury Board as well. But we're working through the complexities based on how this is done to make sure there's more equity for our troops and when it comes to deployments. If you were there with me at that Defence Committee meeting, hearing the Minister's answer, I think you, like me, would have thought that he meant the 15 soldiers were going to see their pay and benefits restored. But just like with the carbon tax and the health plan tax, when Liberals see an unfair tax situation, their default solution is to raise taxes on everybody. And that's exactly what was done. The Prime Minister did not help the 15 soldiers who lost a tax exemption. The Liberal Party took the exemption away from the rest of the soldiers serving in Kuwait. Madam Speaker, for months, the Prime Minister has known that a small group of Canadian soldiers in the fight against international terrorism were having their danger pay clawed back while others on the deployment were not. When confronted with this policy, the decision by our Conservative critic, the response by the Liberal Party was to claw back everyone's danger pay. Now, more than 300 soldiers will be losing up to $9,000 for a 6-month deployment because of a puppet defence minister who prefers to take his marching orders from the Prime Minister's puppet master, Gerald Butts, rather than listen to his own conscience. It's beyond belief how quickly this government minimizes the risk of our soldiers that they face in the Middle East by clawing back their danger pay. The risk of death is very real. The $1,800 per month the Liberals are ripping away from our troops and their families, it's peanuts to the government compared to the absence of a loved one who is proudly serving his or her country. That loss is priceless. And it's peanuts compared to the billions of dollars that are being wasted on the Prime Minister's foreign aid vanity projects. When the Conservative Defense Minister faced the same problem in Afghanistan, he cut through the bureaucratic red tape to ensure our troops would not get shortchanged. In 2014, before our troops were ever deployed to Kuwait, our Conservative government ensured they would be qualifying for full danger pay. And I invite Canadians to fact-check the Finance Canada's website. Liberal apologists are just plain wrong trying to insinuate blame to others for this outrageous clawback policy. The first cuts by the Liberals were done on September 1st, 2016. The talk on my military base in Petawawa is get ready for the summer deployment. And they're asking me, will our pay be clawed back, or will we have proper uniforms, remembering the decision by the Christian Liberals to send soldiers to Afghanistan without proper uniforms? And what else will the Liberals take away? If the Defense Minister does not stand up to the Prime Minister's puppet master and take action now, a lot more troops on other missions will be impacted starting this summer. It's wrong for the Liberals to take away $1,800 a month from each of our troops who are in harm's way. And the members of this government really need to ask, is the cost of buying a seat on the United Nations Security Council worth the price of cheapening the lives of our soldiers by clawing back danger pay? Liberals have no problem borrowing billions, but they undervalue the women and men serving in uniform. When will the Defense Minister stop funding the Prime Minister's out-of-control spending on the backs of our troops? The Defense Minister, I want to say, is a proud veteran and should know better than anyone how important danger pay is, not just to our brave women and men in uniform, but to their families back home as well. Soldiers who lived through the decade of darkness, the military cutbacks, knew that Liberals would cut defense spending when they got in again, but they did not ever imagine that the Prime Minister would literally do it on the backs of the military and their families. On behalf of the women and men in uniform, I'm asking this Defense Minister to quit taking his marching orders from the Prime Minister, fight for our troops, and reinstate all of the danger pay and benefits for all of our troops who are in the fight against international terrorism. And I'm proud of the work that our soldiers are doing, especially the special operations forces on the ground today, as well as the air combat mission that's taking place based out of Kuwait. As a member of Parliament whose riding includes Garrison Petawawa, Canada's largest military base and home to the Canadian Special Operations Regiment, I'm very sensitive about the treatment of our soldiers. The soldiers and their families are extended family to me. In our community, we share the highs and the lows. And at the end of the day, we stand together. When the member for Vancouver South was named Defense Minister, there was a hope amongst our women and men in uniform that maybe, just maybe, by appointing somebody who had actual service in the military reserves, the Liberal Party was trying to make amends for the decade of darkness. The decision to claw back the pay of soldiers serving in a war zone and the mistreatment of injured veterans has eliminated any goodwill this government may have had when the member for Vancouver South was first appointed Defense Minister. The disgust of all things Liberal held by members of the military community who lived through the decade of darkness and the politically motivated decision to disband the Canadian Airborne Regiment has transferred to a new generation of soldiers. Let us not forget the veterans' disgust at the way tomorrow's veterans are being treated. Veterans are not interested in hearing how many new bureaucrats have been hired or that empty offices are being opened in government ridings. They're not interested in listening to the Liberal Party fight the last election using the same tired campaign rhetoric that was used to confuse veterans and their families. Mindless talking points scripted by the Prime Minister's office are not acceptable to veterans. Veterans want action. Veterans are not interested in the fake promises of the Prime Minister. Under the Liberals, our troops feel like they've been kicked in the stomach and their families feel cheated. I call on the Liberal government to finally do its job, reverse the abhorrent decision, and support the brave women and men who stand on guard for us. Hear, hear.